Today we'll be talking about Benjamin Franklin's other writings. As with all the Benjamin Franklin's achievements, if you only read the autobiography, you would probably think that this guy is an awesome, crazy old man. By crazy, I just mean the fact that he was literally everything that could have actually given him some kind of leverage in the political, literature, and philosophical world. Here, he's a writer, a scientist, an inventor, a statesman, a diplomat, a printer, this is his original job, his publisher, also technically his original job, and a political philosopher, this is something that came after his printing job. Now, I'm not here to talk about the autobiography. In fact, I already made two biographies, one based on the autobiography, the other one based on all my own research. And one thing to note is that our Franklin himself has never went ahead and revealed as much as he did other than his other writings. With this in mind, we have so much more to really talk about. Just in the contents of the autobiography itself, which I have open right next to me, we have several things that go ahead and reveal what he does, such as a receipt to a New England funeral elegy. I'm just going to write shorthand here. And advice to a friend for choosing a mistress. There's even a speech that's given, and this is of some woman named Miss Polly Baker. And of course we have to talk about his famous kite experiment, the one with the lightning that goes ahead and sends shockwaves down to Little Middle Key. This he probably never actually did, and I'll get to that a little bit later. And right before that one, he even talks about lightning rods and how they could discharge electricity and flow them right into the ground, saving people from, say, a lot of electrocution. Or at the very least, save them from being hit by lightning. Lightning is way much more hotter than the surface of the sun, as we know nowadays, but back then, they probably just thought it really, really hurt. But at least that proves that one of us can go ahead and survive being hit by a solar flare, even only if it's for 1 second. In reality, that is probably a terrible analogy. Please don't do that at all. Don't actually go to the sun and get yourself blown up by a solar flare. Don't you dare even try to touch the surface of the sun. There's also the way towards wealth, the road or way, as it is, to wealth, where he talks about getting wealth, obviously. He even has this edict by the King of Prussia, which is mostly more or less a king making absurd laws against Englishmen. It's a way to say subtly that, hey, the English Parliament, they're making unjust laws towards our colonies, and because of that, that is very unjust, and it is as ridiculous because of the following excerpt. This is an analogy, but in this case, replace King of Prussia with England, and England with America. And then there's a short excerpt from Morals of Chess, the Elysian Fields, information to those who would remove to America, aka espionage, and then he even addresses the public towards Pennsylvania Society for promoting the abolition of slavery and the relief of free Negroes unlawfully held in bondage, aka he was really against slavery. Technically, all the other founding fathers wanted to put that into the the Constitution, but then, well, they realized that most of their economy was relied on slaves, and they themselves were slaveholders, so did they really want to lose all that free labor that they had, essentially? The answer was obviously no. So what do these other writings actually reveal about Franklin? Well, here's the thing. Franklin portrays himself as a sweet old man who, well, sweet as an old man can be, obviously, but more or less he is trying his best to become virtuous, but then realizes he can't be virtuous and then gives up and decides to get into his cravings a lot. He himself portrays himself as an imperfect man, but because he is an imperfect man, he can always try to become virtuous in one way or another. So what happens there? Not much, really. He makes himself portrays in somewhat of a rags to riches kind of guy. Not exactly a rags to riches kind of guy, because he was working for his brother, which is technically his family, but he wasn't paid that much, and then he just ran away to get another job, so I guess that counts as rags to riches. He eventually did create his own very, very successful newspaper, mostly because it was the only newspaper in the area. Eventually publishing other things, such as this little beauty, and all the way going up to become Postmaster General. I believe this is William Franklin. Looks like him. But regardless, this is probably Benjamin Franklin. Mostly because of the newspapers that he's holding and the fact that he's wearing the Postmaster General uniform. He even talks about his inventions. He's so-called creative, but like if you read the other essays, like the other writings that he's done, the speeches and the little political things and the political writings that he's ever written, you can see that most of these are probably not his ideas, except probably the lightning rod. The lightning rod, that was probably like him finding it out immediately. Like other people has went ahead, like Newton and some other guy both invented calculus at the same time, coincidentally, and Alexander Graham Bell and his competitor went ahead and literally filed patents for the telephone within hours of each other. But what do we get out of the other writings? Well, it reveals that he was lying, or at least trying to ignore, most part of his life. And it's because of that what makes him not that old sweet little man. That essay that I told you about, that writing about a letter towards his friend about how to choose a mistress, well, it sounds, if you read certain parts of the excerpt, nay, in fact, the whole excerpt, you will find out that some parts are a little bit naive towards this. One, because as they have no knowledge, like, as a paradox, to prefer old women to young ones. You call this a paradox and demand my reasons. They are these. Because as they have more knowledge of the world, and their minds are more at the store with observation, because once women cease to be handsome, they study to be good and influential, because there's no hazard to children, because through more experience, they have more experience, and because in every animal that walks upright, the dead basket regarding only the girdle, because the sin is less, and because the compunction is less, the having made a young girl miserable may give you frequent bitter reflections. The balking a virgin may be her ruin and make her life unhappy. And Xylee and lastly, they are so grateful. You can already see that this guy is writing from experience, can't you? This guy's writing everything from experience. In the sense that, how would you know all of this? At best, if you were imagining all of this, then how was it very accurate? You can't do this without actually knowing or living the life with that. Alas, so was not Benjamin Franklin. He went ahead, wrote all these, thinking that they'd be private little documents that he would keep to the grave. But then he forgot to store them in a secret place, and would you know it? He's dead. He didn't even bother to finish the autobiography. In fact, he couldn't finish the autobiography. He already died before he could even think about writing before he could even consider writing about his time in Paris, and barely started writing about the American Revolution. And in the end, that's all we have. So Franklin wasn't the sweet old man that we always thought he would be, but unfortunately this has no impact on our perception of him at all. The people don't even bother to, like most people don't bother to read this anymore because they have more important things to do. Like going to their work, creating their schedule, all things that Benjamin Franklin himself actually recommended. But essentially though, we do have to keep in mind that every person has their double sides, except the perfect people, but those are very rare occasions. Benjamin Franklin is not a perfect person. He himself admits he is not a perfect person, but he doesn't admit to how much of an imperfect person he is. As this painting literally shows, he's more of like a womanizer. He loses his control when it comes to women. And you can already see why. Even Thomas Jefferson himself, when he actually met Benjamin Franklin and spent some time with him, saw that he lost control over himself whenever there were women around him. And as you can see, there are at least 4 of them, with at least one of them touching his shoulder suggestively. So that overall, in the end, nothing in this life was actually worth it. He might have been hiding all these things. He might have been like a spy. In fact, there's like a book about the MI6. I'm not going to say the numbers. And then they go ahead and about the British Secret Service, essentially, and they're spying intelligence agency. You know, the one from James Bond, but that one's MI7. This one's MI6. The real one's MI6. And they go ahead and talk about, there's this part of the book, I can't really remember it, that talks about how Benjamin Franklin himself is probably like a double agent. It talks about William Franklin, and then there was this agent who went ahead and sounds a lot like Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin may have told the Americans all the information that they needed when he was in London, but apparently it was only the ones that the British wanted the Americans to know. So they probably just told Benjamin Franklin, and they probably just only gave Benjamin Franklin illicit intel that would help the Americans somewhat and still not make him suspicious towards the British. But not enough for them to like actually win the war. Eventually, though, the Americans did win the war because logistics and the fact that the British were fighting thousands of miles away from their home territory. There are still schools, there are still children, there are still institutions named after this guy. And that's not going to change anytime soon. So I'd say keep the illusion that he's a somewhat crazy old man who has become one of the greatest philosophers and intellectuals of his time, and is still very influential to this day. But it's a big but. You have to understand that there are always two sides to him, and that's what I want to talk about in this video. These other writings reveal other parts that he never actually tried to explicitly talk about. He muddled them, and as I read to you in that excerpt, it does sound like these derogatory sayings that he's writing about all come from experience. So go read the book, and don't read the autobiography. Read the other writings and the notes, because this is in Old English. Notes are really helpful. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Hunter and John. I hope to see you guys soon. Until next time, Shihana, peace. Bye bye.